for kindergarten to grade 3. LSP firmly believes that young learners learn best when the mother tongue is used as a medium of instruction, particularly in the early stage of basic education. And a good number of studies done in other countries and in the Philippines all point to the singular thing, that the use of the mother tongue as language of instruction benefited the learners in various ways. And LSP therefore believes that the problem is not MTB-MLE itself, but how it is currently implemented in the country. So what has happened between February 2020 and today? The answers will come from an academic who is also a staunch advocate of MTB-MLE. And I am very grateful, ako po ay nagpapasalamat that she acceded to our invitation, that she delivers a lecture on current issues and concerns on MTB-MLE despite the short notice. Actually po, today's lecture, kung maaari ko lang po maibahagi, when it was being conceptualized, it was only a simple classroom activity where our speaker will casually share something about MTB-MLE with 5 PhD students of mine. Lo and behold, it has become a huge event that it is today. And thanks to our speaker and everyone who is here to celebrate, for celebrating Philippine languages. Nagpapasalamat po ako sa inyong lahat sa kabila ng maulang panahon, unstable internet connectivity. Tayo po ay magkakasama ngayong umagang ito. I congratulate my diligent PhD students for organizing this event with ease and enthusiasm. And I thank you all. I thank everyone for joining us this morning. Muli po, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, Dr. Bernardo, for the warm welcome, and also for giving us the opportunity to hold a webinar that empowers every language teacher and inspires every learner. And speaking of empowerment, there is one person who can truly help us know more about the current issues and concerns in MTB-MLE and guide us as to how we relate this in the teaching and learning process. We are delighted to have her with us right now. But before we get to the highlight of this event, may we have Ms. Cherry Ann M. Luna, another PhD ELS student and a faculty from Marinduque State College, to introduce our research speaker for this morning's session.
Thank you, Sir Joram. It is indeed a privilege to be assigned with the task of introducing our resource speaker for today's webinar. She is a faculty member at the College of Education, University of the Philippines, and an affiliate professor of the UP Open University. She holds a PhD in Anthropology and Sociology of Education, and her dissertation was an ethnographic study on policy enactment of MTB-MLE Big Book Making among teachers in Bugias, Benguet. She has authored and co-authored numerous scholarly publications and has delivered various lectures and presentations in seminars and conferences locally and abroad. Among her most notable accomplishments are her work with various institutions in relation to the MTB-MLE implementation. She has served as a principal investigator on the study of the implementation synergy of MTB-MLE, a project funded by the UP Center for Integrative Development. She has also served as a research consultant for the Philippines in a study on the status of language use in classrooms, which was a program under UNESCO Bangkok. Currently, she serves as a consultant for the capacity building and development of storybooks in local languages of selected indigenous communities and development of national training module for storybook writing. Also, she currently serves as a researcher and consultant for the operations manual for MTB-MLE program implementation in linguistically diverse contexts, a program of DepEd and UNICEF. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Maria Mercedes Arzadon.
Thank you. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. I-share ko lang po yung aking screen. Okay. So I'm delighted to be invited to speak before you all at UST. A few weeks ago, I was invited by ISO, Isabela State University, and other HEIs in Region 2. And I think with all the discussions on language of learning, language of assessment, we know the ano ba yun, the discussion, the hot discussion about the language of testing used for PISA, TIMSS, CPLM, and DepEd said that the low performance was due to the language of assessment. So magandang pag-usapan talaga itong ano na to, itong topic na to, especially that you're coming from English studies. English is one of our official languages. We have our own Philippine English, and I'm glad that you were doing a study on this particular topic. And so as I was introduced a while ago, I'm going to speak before you as a teacher. I'm a teacher educator, hindi po ako linguist. I'm also part of the training team that trained the MTB-MLE trainers in 2010, 2011. And one major source of my presentation, of course, is my study sa Bugyas Benguet, because this is where MTBMLE is working. They have produced numerous storybooks, and they are proud that their students are able to read after a few months of instruction. And a year ago, I was invited to help in creating the operations manual for MTBMLE. In fact, I'm going to submit one draft, our latest draft this evening. And so being part of the team, I came to see how MTBMLE is being implemented in DepEd. And I realized, as you might have read from the articles of many writers like Dr. Tupas, that MTBMLE was introduced in the Philippines through advocacy, of various groups like Linguistic Society of the Philippines, yung mga yan, sina Dr. Martin. So we were literally almost forcing the DepEd people like USEC Vilma Labrador and USEC Yoli Quijano to issue the DepEd order to promote MTBMLE. Despite of the refusal of Secretary Jesly Lapus then. So because of advocacy of various groups, the policy was introduced. Unfortunately, because it was advocacy driven, the program was not properly implemented, as I am discovering now as we do the MTBMLE operations manual. I was even surprised that it is not part of the KRA of the principal, it is not part of the RPMS, the performance management program of DepEd, and it doesn't have any monitoring tool, So kaya pala hindi na-i-implement. Dahil nga, so kailangan talagang pag-isipan. And what's unfortunate, when the results of the CPLM test was published, the Philippines ranked at the bottom, and the report stated that the children use or they learn in their mother tongue. So are they really learning in their mother tongue? In my opinion, MTBMLE is being implemented, but not in all schools. And it depends on the power of the principal and teacher advocates. There are, in my study, I found some teacher advocates who literally pressure their principal to produce mother tongue storybooks. So hopefully, as a result of this discussion, the attention being given on the policy because of that Marco bill, and plus other bills like yung bill ni sino to yung taga Bicol, Salceda. He has a bill about MTBMLE also. So I hope that because of this attention and this particular forum being sponsored by HEIs, there will be changes. There will be changes in the implementation, and there will be more support given to the policy. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so what's MTBMLE? For those who are not familiar, maybe for those who are young, and we're not yet around when this was conceptualized, MTBMLE, as defined by the K-12 law and the DepEd Order 21, refers to the effective use of more than 2 languages in the teaching-learning process, starting from the language that the learner is more familiar with before introducing other languages. And what is L1, or what is the mother language? It refers to the language or languages. So you notice here that there's an acknowledgement that a child can have many L1. You know? Unlike in 2009, there was only one mother tongue in the DepEd Order 74. First learned by a child which he or she identifies with, is identified as a native language user by others, which she knows best or uses most. This includes Filipino Sign Language. So yung MTB-MLE sa Pilipinas is something that is not isolated. Ano? It's, you know, as I attend conferences sa international, you know, yung mga sa Southeast Asia, UNESCO, I found out that more and more countries are implementing MTB-MLE. So sabi ng isang book na to, multilingualism has become an increasingly common global phenomenon, especially in the last 2 decades. Therefore, multilingual programs have now been regarded as a cornerstone of education system in many countries around the world. In fact, when K-12 was passed in 2013, the MTB-MLE, the inclusion of MTB-MLE was regarded as the corner, as the, ano ba tawag dun, yung centerpiece of that policy introduced by Philippine President Aquino. And so this has been the trend, during the colonial period, the colonial languages like English, French, Portuguese were used as the sole medium of instruction in school. Alam natin na in 1901, there was this policy that only English can be used. And that time, during the American period, if you would like to use any other language aside from English, kunyari may magsasalita, no, may invited speaker who would speak in Ilocano or Pangasinan, they have to seek permission from the ministry, the head of education that time. So ganun talagang restricted. And then after World War II, after independence of countries from colonial power, there was this consolidation of people. So they had to introduce yung national language. So yun, the time we selected Filipino based on Tagalog initially as our national language. And part of that process was intellectualizing our languages, using them in school as a tool, as a language for instruction and for academic discourse. So kasabay natin kunyari yung bahasa, na talagang ginamit siya from elementary hanggang PhD na language of instruction. Unfortunately, yung Filipino or Tagalog, hindi siya nag-prosper because maraming mga awayan, conflicts, tension between groups that are pro-mother tongue, pro-Philippine languages, and pro-English. Kaya hindi nag-prosper. So right now, that's why Tagalog or Filipino is only used in social studies, values education, and it is not used in science, math. We have to learn, we have to teach our children using English. Unlike Bahasa and other languages in Asia, they use their own language in teaching all subjects. Even Bangladesh, they use Bangla up to PhD. And then lately, there's recognition of the value of indigenous and local languages. So there's a move towards the inclusion of these languages in school, beginning in elementary or preschool. Okay, and our policy in MTB-MLE is based on researches on learning, on education. Unlike in the past, the policy for language was based on recognition. Alam naman natin siguro yung history, yung mga awayan ng Tagalog versus Bisaya, Ilocano ngayon. But sa MTB-MLE, the focus is no longer the competition or recognition of this group, but more on the child's learning. So the leading theories in MTBMLE, James Cummins said in 2001 that there is a massive amount of data showing consistently strong and positive relationship between academic development in L1 and L2 among dominant and non-dominant language students. And then in 2013, he highlighted the same thing. Pero sabi niya, the amount of research that has accumulated is such that it's not possible to credibly deny the legitimacy of multilingual education for minority and marginalized students. And so the study is coming from various sources, pati yung mga nasa brain science research. They're saying the value of maintaining your multilingual yung multilingualism ng students. They have better yung kanilang executive function ng brain nila is better if they are multilingual. So even among our congressmen, they're saying that they are not denying the value of multilingual education. Talagang problema lang ay yung implementation. Kaya when the MTBMLE was institutionalized in 2009, ito yung isa sa mga resulto ng advocacy. I remember yung LSP, we had a meeting at CMIO, meron pa kaming yung sign up signature campaign. Okay, so this was the fruit of that advocacy. So sinasabi ng the first policy that institutionalized MTBMLE that there are indeed lessons from various local initiatives in international studies that validated the superiority of the child's mother tongue. And that time, kasi 2015 yung target ng EFA, That's why DepEd accepted MTBMLE because hindi natin naaabot yung ating EFA target. So they were willing, they were open to accept any solution. So MLE was one. So the researchers show that children or learners learn to read more quickly. Okay. And then if they are taught in their mother tongue, they learn the second language or third language more quickly than those who start with a second language. And then it's in terms of cognitive development, pupils taught to read and write in their first language acquire such competencies more quickly. So especially yung critical thinking, is more enhanced when a child is yung kanyang multilingual competence is being enhanced. So ito yung binabanggit ng mga studies ng DepEd order na yon. We had several initiatives as early as sa Hongduan, Ifugao, 1980s. They had that study, and then in Lobuagan. So these are studies done by SIL. And then even our DepEd initiatives. When we had that first advocacy meeting, they mentioned yung study ng 1925 na counts, and that the recommendation to use the mother tongue as early as 1925. And then in 1948, after the war, dahil nagkaroon ng community school movement, nina Jose Aguilar, nina Orata, and part of the initiative of the community school movement was the introduction of local languages. In the Iloilo experiment, they used Hiligaynon. Then afterwards, in 1953, UNESCO published yung first material on multilingual education, and they highlighted the experiment of Dr. Jose Aguilar. Bida sila doon. And the head of Ministry of Education, they were, he was mentioned there. They had to go to Paris to, to explain about this project. That's why the vernacular education was introduced in 1956. And yung mga matatanda na dyan, alam niyo yung Pepe and Pilar. So those were the readers, the basal readers that were introduced as part of the vernacular education. And then DepEd had its Lingua Franca project, the TEEP project, which used some languages in the Philippines. And then before MTBMLE became part of the K-12 program, mayroong pilot schools, that's 903 pilot schools. Okay, in other places, mga 10 years before or more than 10 years before we introduced NTBMLE in the Philippines, countries in Africa began to implement their own MTBMLE. Sa kanila galing yung term na NTBMLE, So it was part of their post-apartheid initiatives. So they began to recognize yung kanilang languages plus their local knowledge system. And then later on, the studies from Africa were used to advocate for NTBMLE in Asia and Pacific. Tayo kasi sa Asia and Africa ang most linguistically diverse countries in all over the world. And in terms of indigenous people, majority, ilan ba? 60% of indigenous people all over the world are found in Asia. So in terms of countrywide implementation of NTBMLE, it's supported, hosted by the Ministry of Education. Ang example nito ay Philippines, nauna tayo ng konti, and then Cambodia. What's nice with Cambodia is, mas sila, mas unti-unti, okay? And they have asked the help of various international NGOs in its implementation. Okay, lately Nepal, it's part of their yung kanilang bagong constitution. I think it was in 2017. And last year, India. And before the Philippines, Papua New Guinea was the first country in Asia Pacific to use NTBMLE. And among their 600 languages, kailan nagkaroon ng problem? Kulang, imagine 600 languages, kulang sa implementation. And now it is just parang optional, hindi na siya kagaya dati. So I hope that we will not end like Papua New Guinea. And other countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar, Indonesia, Malaysia, the MTB-MLE programs are led by NGOs like SIL, UNICEF, yan yung mga yan, Save the Children. Okay? So, yung MTB-MLE has brought about shifts, nagbago, nagkaroon ng pagbabago sa literacy instruction. For example, itong before, itong si Halan Abadsi, siya yung known expert sa literacy, and he wrote this material, efficient way of teaching reading among the poor. So she's referring to countries in the Philippines, in Asia and Africa. And sa kanyang model, talagang code-based literacy, yung magde-decode. But NTBMLE that was introduced in the Philippines is strongly literature-based, yung ginagamit sa mga private school na maraming storybooks. Okay, so there's a shift from a dominant language-based literacy to literature-based literacy. And literacy is, starting with the letter sound, the schema of the child, And there's the shift also into using of locally made, culturally appropriate picture books, storybooks. Dati, storybooks were produced centrally, like Adarna, Hiyas, sila yung gumagawa. But because of this NTBMLE literacy, like a study showed that these central, these big publishers do not have the capacity to produce mother tongue materials, kaya talagang localized talaga ang production ng materials. Like what, if you notice here, this is a public school. So nasa isang school to ng mga farmers, vegetable farmers sa Benguet. And yet you see the teacher showing, this is a grade 2 teacher, using a storybook that she made. So nakita rin, mayroon ding shift. Nakita niya dito sa taas, ito sa Benguet dito, sa Luo. So nakita mo yung ABC, okay? Dito nakita nyo, iba yung arrangement niya. So this is the mother tongue. This is how they teach the sounds. They do not start with ABC, but A-N-I-D-U-T. Bakit? And then here, beside this is, in this kindergarten class, meron siyang big book. Bakit iba yung kanyang ka-alphabet chart? Kasi what they do in NTBMLE is they study the language and determine ano ba yung most frequently used sounds. Kaya yung mga familiar sa marungko, in teaching Filipino, you use marungko. Ano? Kaya dito sa pataas, ito yung grade 1 class at luo. Sa taas, ito yung anidot, teaching kankanaay, literacy. Sa baba, teaching Filipino, kaya MSA yan. Yung mga familiar sa marungko, this is how you teach to read in Filipino. Ano? Ito yung sequencing niya. Okay, and then what they do in that particular place, they develop a big book for each sound. So for anidot, so ito letter N, D, kaya no, mayroon silang story tungkol sa race. And then yung pangalan ng characters, if you notice, lahat nagsisimula sa letter D. Ano? Kasi so it's creating yung phonemic awareness sa sound ng D. Ano? So that's how they teach reading. They develop the reading primer based on the most frequently used letter sounds. Okay, effective ba? No? This is a class at Kutkut Elementary School, a small school sa isang gitna ng vegetable farms. And this is November, ilang months pa lang, ano? Mga 5 months. Usually, sa public school, children start reading at the end of grade 1 or grade 3. Ano? For a long time, grade 3 sila na-expect na magbasa. Pero tignan nyo itong mga batang to. Ano? The teacher here, Ma'am Julie, was trained in MTB-MLE.
Na ilana nan ko daw si pamakawan ang kibalot at kanan man taoli ka kasin si boy di boy ko tasay panteto ang man taoli akno adi kan pumalsiit tan matayak adino mata maanak maga adi mi then is for them and the carol then masaya and can
Okay, so nakita natin dito na the teacher made her own big books. And then yung iba maliliit, ano, may smaller books. And then they also made their own leveled reader in Filipino and English. Ano? And these children, they read, they are free to go to the reading centers and to pick up any reading material. Ano? So nag-enjoy sila magbasa. But what I found interesting ay November pa lang nakakabasa na sila, no? This is quite unlike other schools na talagang matagal. Marami pang non-reader, ano? Sa time na to. Okay? So there's also a shift in teaching additional languages. So before, dati ang focus niya is language learning, how to learn English, for example, or Filipino. Pero sa MTBMLE or other model ng multilingual education, the focus is developing metalinguistic awareness. And in the past, the mother tongue, the home language, the L1 is seen as interference. Kaya nga, when you are teaching L2 before, you are not allowed, or if you're teaching English, hindi pwedeng gumamit ng mother tongue. Ano? Talagang you just use English, the target language, and you use pictures, other ways to scaffold teaching, except the L1. Ano? So L1 was seen as interference, but now with MTBMLE, L1 is seen as a resource, and it's a source of, it encodes yung funds of knowledge. So hindi na siya interference, but it is a resource. And MTBMLE promotes a pluralist, decolonized, and principled view of L2 instruction. Like in the past, ang tingin sa English ay, kung magaling ka mag-English, matalino ka, ano? So parang English was everything. The reason that you send your child to school is to learn English. But MTBMLE is promoting a pluralist view of languages. And, hindi naman yung lingwahe ang nagsasabi na matalino ka. So yun, there's a movement towards that. And the child is seen as a multilingual person learning in a multilingual society. So there's a promotion of this particular mindset. Okay, so here's an example of a school. Wala pa ako nakita sa Pilipinas eh. Ito sa Amerika, yung kanilang dual language program, they use Spanish and English. They use Spanish as the L1. And we see here how they are using Spanish as a resource in teaching English.
Los cognados son similares en el inglés y en español, pero en este caso, en esta lección, es algo que va a ser diferente y es importante aprender también las cosas que son diferentes en los dos idiomas. Vamos a aprender de la posesión. ¿Puede decir posesión? Posesión. Posesión significa que algo es mío. Posesión.
Los zapatos de David son fabulosos.
Vamos a leerlos juntos. Los zapatos de David son fabulosos. ¿Ven el patrón? De. Ahora vamos a hacer el puente. Vamos a hacer la conexión del español al inglés. Es un poquito diferente.
When the teacher had done an oral language analysis, one of the students had said, the shovel of the paleontologists. Now, for a teacher who understands Spanish, you know this student is doing a brilliant thing. They're using the grammatically correct form of possessives in Spanish, only substituting in the English vocabulary. We call this an approximation instead of calling it an error. It's a student who's getting there. They're using what they know in one language and approximating it in the next.
That is actually not how you would say it in English, but I really love the way that you're using what you know in Spanish to try to make sense of English.
We can build on these strengths by acknowledging them, acknowledging the genius of them, and then teaching the correct way to say it in the other language.
In English, we say Mrs. Lopez's with apostrophe S key is gold. This is how you say it in English correctly.
The shoes of David are fabulous. I think you would say David's shoes are fabulous.
Los cognados son...
Okay, so nakita natin doon, sabi niya na, I like how you're using what you know in Spanish, and use it in English. So they don't call it error, they call it approximation. So you see here that, there's an appreciation of what the child knows, and it's an asset-based type of education. Okay, dito naman yung TransLanguaging. TransLanguaging was introduced by Dr. Ofelia Garcia, and they had this experiment at New York, in some schools at New York, na may mga Spanish, Russian, Japanese, iba-ibang mga students. I think it began in 2009. And one linguist, Dr. Sang Sok-sun, he's Korean, he learned, he learned from that experience ni Dr. Garcia, and he started this TransLanguaging based education sa Chiang Mai, Thailand, and they use Thai, Karen, Hmong, and English, So sa TransLanguaging kasi, you do not see languages as something bounded, So you use several languages, the child's languages in instruction. So hindi na yung kunyari Tagalog lang or Bisaya lang or Tausug. So dito there's this class. They are using all these languages at the same time. So if you want to see what he does, you can look at his website. So dito nakikita natin dito sa baba, the teacher taught the lesson in Thai, and then they grouped them by languages. So this particular child, Karen speaking, so she discussed the topic with her group mates using Karen. Ito nakakatuwa, kung yung video ni Dr. Sang Sok-sun, the teacher becomes a learner. So she would, for example, discuss a topic on pagkain ng mga animals, and then she would ask the pupils to contribute what they know. Ano yung tawag nyo dito sa inyong language? So you would see there, the matrix of a particular object, and then she would engage her student to share what they know. And so dito, no, yung mga output nila, the child wrote a particular, yung parang short essay in her home language, and then she translated it in the school language, which is Thai. Ito naman isang bata, no, depende sa gusto nila. She first wrote the statement, the assignment in the school language, and then she wrote it in her home language. You know? So parang hindi lang yung from mother tongue to L2, pero nagkakaroon din ng recursivity. You know? Because there are some places na walang opportunities. There are no materials to use the L1. So what they do, they teach them the script, the decoding skills in their L2, and then the children are given opportunities to practice what they know in their L1. So ito yung mga example ng MTB-MLE that we can learn from, that focuses on the transfer from L1 to L2. Okay. Now let's look at the overall programming ng MTB-MLE. From my own experience in study, kasi si Susan Malone, she also introduced this kind of yung tawag dito yung graphic organizer conceptual framework, okay, ng strong MTB-MLE. However, si Susan Malone kasi sanay sila sa mga small communities. Implement this, she's a SIL representative. They would introduce MTB-MLE in small villages. Sa atin kasi, iba yung context ng Pilipinas. We introduce MTB-MLE as a system-wide project. Ano? Kaya mas iba yung kanyang dynamic. So I found that what's important in having a functional MTB-MLE is national and local policies. And then, hindi lang implementation support. Okay? So, kailangan ng funding. Ano? For example, walang funding na nakaalat sa materials. And so, in my study, the teachers funded their own big book project. What DepEd did, their division did, was to give points, credit points for promotion. Ano? Kaya kung nakaproduce ka ng 20 big books, then you have 20 points for promotion na maging master teacher. Ano? Meron ding konti from Special Education Fund, but there's not enough. Lately, DepEd in 2019 issued a DepEd order allowing the use of MOOE in using for the production of storybooks, mother tongue materials, but it's not yet being operationalized. Kasi kailangan talaga ng implementation support. It should be reflected in the KRA, the School Improvement Plan, incentive system, the monitoring and evaluation system. Then there should be community support from the LGU. You would see later on that LGUs that support the lingua franca also provide money for MTB-MLE. Support from local writers para hindi kawawa yung mga teachers. Sila na ngayon nagtuturo, then they still write the material. So if the local writers are involved, then it will be easier for the teacher. Local media, local businesses, for example. So if the child goes out of the classroom, nakakabasa pa rin siya ng mga materials, literacy materials in the mother tongue, hindi lang sa classroom. And HEIs, so the teachers who teach MTB-MLE come from HEI, TEIs, local publisher. There should be a curriculum for MTB-MLE and procedure in teaching literacy content areas. Paano ka magtuturo ng pagbabasa using L1? How do you introduce L2 using L1? How do you teach science, math, social studies? And then the number of years of exposure. Importante ito, no? So you're familiar siguro sa short exit and long exit. So they're saying that it's not enough to use mother tongue only up to grade 3, because the studies that produce good results have long exposure to the mother tongue, like the Thomas and Collier study, the whole stretch of elementary education. Then there should be learning resources, children literature, and various materials, training of teachers, and not just teachers, school heads, talagang very, very, talagang I could not emphasize much yung talagang I cannot enough yung value of training the school heads, the principal. Kasi kahit na train si teacher, if the principal is not providing support, then mahina siya, no? The supervisors, the writers, the parents, and the developers of materials, appropriate learning assessments. Ayan, dito na yung isang issue ito, no? What kind of assessments that will capture the strength of NTBMLE? The assessments that we have, like PISA and TIMSS, are meant for OECD countries that are monolingual. Kailangan ng advocacy, because studies, countless studies would report na ang problema talaga ay yung acceptance. Language, they call it language attitude, language ideology. So we need to present NTBMLE as something rights, that it's rights-based. It is quality education. It is honoring, recognizing diversity. It is culturally responsive. And then ito yung 4 minima ng DepEd. What are the materials that are needed so that you can implement NTBMLE? Because in the past, in 2009, any community can use any language. But later on, DepEd said that dapat merong 4 minima. So let me go, let me discuss each aspect. Okay, sa Pilipinas, ito nga yung sinabi kong 4 minima, no? So before a language is used as official, so mayroong official medium of instruction. Ibig sabihin, naka-record siya sa LIS, sa information system ng DepEd. Kailangan meron siyang 4 minima or most essential requirements. Kailangan ng spelling guide or orthography, dictionary or at least a glossary, grammar guide, and reading materials like the storybooks. And dapat merong teacher who can speak the language. So in 2012, these were the 19 official school languages or official mother tongues that were introduced. Meron na siyang 4 minima. Okay? So if you notice, there are lingua franca, large languages. Meron ding mga indigenous languages. May big and small languages na included sa 19. Lately, Dr. Ariola reported in February that there are 20 languages who have fulfilled the 4 minima and they are being reviewed for implementation. So ito siya, 20. These are, most of them are in Region 3. And then 26 languages with 4 minima requirements for finalization. So ito na yung anytime would be officialized as medium of instruction. So mabuti naman marami na sa CAR, because I was quite sad when NTBMLE became as a policy. Nagsimula yung NTBMLE sa Lulubwagan, for example, sa Lubwagan, using Lulubwagan, pero hindi siya kasama sa 19 languages. And not a single Cordillera language was included, in the 19 languages. So I'm glad that this time they are recognizing these languages in the Cordillera. Okay, so what are the policies, enabling policies? So ito yung mga policies natin before that included the use of Filipino, or Tagalog and then Filipino. So before it was just English. And then in 2009, dito na lumabas yung DepEd Order 74. So it institutionalizes the child's mother tongue as primary medium of instruction in all subject areas from preschool until at least grade 3. So napansin niyo ito yung wording niya noong 2009, at least until grade 3. So ibig sabihin pwedeng stretch, the whole stretch ng elementary. So pero nung yung K-12 hanggang grade 3 na, nilagyan siya ng cap. Yung iba pang policy, the Early Years Act of 2013 or the Kindergarten Act, So the child's first language shall be used as the medium of instruction. In the IRR, nakalagay doon, depende kung may resources. Okay, so the policy creates a more accessible educational environment for children with disabilities. So the FSL is mentioned there. And then RA 10533, ito yung K-12 Act. Ano? So dito, ang pinagkaiba nito, nagkaroon ng mother tongue as a learning area. So it's not just a medium of instruction, but it's also an additional subject from kindergarten to grade 3. Ano? And it shall focus on developing language and literacy skills. Okay, so it also stated there that instruction, teaching materials, and assessment shall be in the regional or native language of the learners. And then, before in 2009, nakalagay doon until at least grade 3, dito nagkaroon ng debate because some framers, some policy, like Lunigundo, gusto niya hanggang grade 6, ano? Pero yung iba hanggang grade 3. So para mayroong nag-negotiate sila, the middle ground is the DepEd shall formulate a mother language transition program from mother tongue to Filipino English from grade 4 to grade 6. Filipino and English shall be gradually introduced as languages of instruction. Okay? And then the FSL Act in 2018, so siguro kung may contribution si President Duterte sa MTB-MLE is this particular law. No? So the Philippine Sign Language is recognized as medium of official communication and language of instruction of deaf education. Okay, so yan, ano? And then recently, ito yung mga specific department orders that support NTBMLE. Ito yung mga major, 2015. Ito mahaba talaga to, no? It specify how children, yung kanilang languages, yung mga kindergarten children as they enter the school or yung mga transferees, their mother tongue will be evaluated and there will be language mapping. So the result of language mapping will determine what materials to be used, the deployment of teachers. Ito naman, yung ELLN, okay? So nag-produce yung DepEd ng training packages, na computerized for the teaching of early language, literacy and numeracy program. Okay, and then ito rin yung isang major, yung IP education framework. And ito yung pinaka-latest, DepEd Order 21. Mayroong 27 pages na guidelines dyan on implementing MTBMLE. Okay, now let's look at the MTBMLE curriculum. So if you go to the DepEd website, you will find there the mother tongue curriculum from kindergarten to grade 3. And then ito yung description ng how mother tongue will be taught, ano yung mga areas na ituturo sa mother tongue. So ito yung mga iba't ibang aspects, So it's not just reading, but pati yung attitude towards language, study skill. Okay. This is the framework that DepEd used for the 3-language program. So gradual talaga, So you start on the child's L1 and then you start with the oral L2 and then written L2. So mayroon siyang pero kung babasahin mo yung curriculum nila, ito yung sinasabi nila, that it should be, ito yung sinasabi sa mga policy, it should be introduced, L2, L3 should be introduced gradually. But if you look at the curriculum guide, there seems to be ibang perspective, that you can do them simultaneously. So makikita natin dito yung debates in literacy instruction. Kasi there are 2 debates. There are 2 positions in that debate. One is to introduce it gradually. The other one is the children are capable of learning several languages simultaneously. Okay, isa rin ginagawa ng DepEd is to yung nabanggit ko kayo na language mapping. When a child enters school, the parent will fill out yung SIS, Student Information Sheet, and that parent will indicate kung ano yung mother tongue. And oftentimes, the parents cannot understand ano ba yung mother tongue. Minsan akala nila, ano yung desired target language. So sabi nila, dapat matuto yung anak ko ng English, so they would write English there or Filipino. So in the policy, in DepEd Order 55, the teacher has to verify, ano ba talaga yung mother tongue ng bata? Ano yung L1? By the way, they are moving away from the use of mother tongue, they are using L1 now, dahil na medyo problematic. And as the teacher verifies, observe niya yung bata habang nakikipag-usap sa school, sa playground, then the teacher will encode in the LIS the child's mother tongue. When this IS information system was introduced in 2012, there were only 12 languages, dialects kang nakalagay, na mamimili ka lang. But later, I think in 2018, so meron na siyang drop-down menu, and you can now encode 3 languages that the child can speak. Dati isa lang, dialect, ngayon mother tongue na, and pati dialects na rin. However, DepEd doesn't have yung set of guidelines. Paano malalaman ng teacher kung ano yung 1, 2, 3, ano yung mother tongues niya, So isa tong lead area, ABC Project and BCOL by USAID is introducing a tool, So ito yung DepEd also introduce yung sectioning, what to do when there's only one language. Kunyari, Cebuano is the dominant language, so there's only one class, one language. Paano kung kunyari sa boundary ng Pangasinan and La Union, so may Pangasinense, may Ilocano. So they are suggesting 2 class, 2 languages. So may section for Ilocano speaking and another section for Pangasinan speaking. And then paano kung more than more than one language or more than 2 languages? Okay, so ito yung kanilang arrangement na one section will be for example for Ilocano, and then another section is for example ay Kankanae and Ibaloy, so yun, to be assisted. So one class is monolingual, 1 or 2 classes can be bi or trilingual, to be assisted by parents who are native speakers, And then kung marami, kunyari nasa city siya, okay, so what they do is the use of community language, the lingua franca. And then dapat merong 3 sessions, after school session, parang remedial classes, tutorial classes for children who do not speak the lingua franca as their L1. So mayroon siyang after school, and there should be support by parents. In sa implementation, parang nahihirapan mag-work itong dalawang to. Usually ang model sa DepEd itong una or itong lingua franca. However, with the introduction of TransLanguaging, pwedeng magamit yung mother tongue, several mother tongues in one class, at hindi lang yung lingua franca. So in terms of training and deployment, ito yung ginanap. I'm sharing yung material ni Dr. Ariola. So ito, it's the first MTB-MLE trainers. They were given training sa UP noong 2010, 53 sila, and then later they were sent to Payap, Thailand for 1-month training by SIL. It's interesting, the first set of trainers ng MTBMLE were trainers of NEP, yung National English Proficiency Program. Dati nung panahon ni GMA, merong program na to improve English. And then, nung nawala na yung NEP, they were sent to be trainers to receive training on MTBMLE. Kaya talagang nakita ko yung how they started as being resistant. Kasi nga, English language trainers sila, and now they are being trained to, for MTBMLE. And then, in fairness to DepEd, talagang nagkaroon siya ng training na intensive training for trainers for the region. So, ilang matagal, 1-month training for MTBMLE trainers sa 17 regions. So there were 4 phases. So I participated in this training program. And then mayroon din sa region and division. So they started sa region and then they cascaded up to the division. So ito yung mga trainers na binigay ng DepEd through the years 2017, 2018, 2019. So if you notice, na yung mga tinitrain ay nasa regional levels only, yung mga selected, hindi na lahat. Unlike in 2012 that all teachers were trained, yung mass training talaga, hindi yung cascading or selected trainees. DepEd has also issued policy on recruitment. So if you're applying to be a teacher, you should be able to demonstrate through ang tawag dun, yung teaching demo how you use the mother tongue. Ano? So if you're able to use the mother tongue in the teaching demo, then you have additional points for acceptance. Kaya nga maganda na, for teacher education, there should be a language. There should be a language subject so that they will learn how to use the mother tongue in instruction. So can you imagine they use the mother tongue? They learn in their mother tongue up to grade 3, and then when they become teachers, they have to use that particular language for instruction. So talagang parang kulang siya, no? So talagang dapat there should be continuing instruction in the use of in the local language. So here are some training concerns. I noticed that in the initial NTBMLE training, mostly grade 1 teachers were trained. Yung mga kindergarten, grade 2, and grade 3, what they had was orientation of the K-12 curriculum. Okay, so wala silang intensive training like the grade 1 teachers. So yung mga na-train sa MTBMLE were those who had supportive supervisors. So they were trained in their own region, in their own division. And there was limited training for school-headed supervisors. Talagang talaga to, walang specific program to train them. So like Ma'am Ariola, the SDS of Tugigaraw then, she would invite the school heads to be yung officer of the day so that they will be exposed sa training ng mga teachers. Kasi in terms of budget, walang nakaalat for them. And then there is a study we issued a survey, and then we found out that in our survey, 37% of the teachers said they had no formal training in NTBMLE. Most likely, these teachers are new, kasi 2013 yung last mass training. So probably they are new teachers or they were newly assigned na magturo ng kinder to grade 3. And then on the PBED paper, they wrote that K-3 teachers who were surveyed scored 44% in MTBMLE instructional knowledge. So talagang mababa yung kanilang kaalaman sa pagtuturo ng MTBMLE, 44% lang ang average. So kailangan talaga ng training ng mga teachers ngayon. In terms of learning resources, DepEd developed write shops, big books and small books in various places, pero hindi lahat. And then there's a nationwide write shop for graded reading, big books for 12 languages. So napansin nyo, wala pa masyado sa mga iba. So parang swerte nitong 12 languages, but how about the rest? Like Kinaraya, ganon, Ibatan that were not included in the original 12. So talagang kulang pa rin. So whatever materials that were produced were initiated by the regions and the division. Okay? So ito yung mga initiative ng central office in materials development. Kung pupunta ka sa LRMDS, this is the this is where they upload the materials. Okay, where the DepEd teachers upload their materials after it is quality assured. Dadaan siya sa quality assurance. Pag natapos na yung mga big books nila, mga worksheets nila sa mother tongue, and other subjects are uploaded here. And if you notice, in grade 1 sa LRMDS, ang pinakamarami ay mother tongue, 1,000 materials in mother tongue for grade 1 were uploaded. So ang dami compared to other subjects. Okay, even in grade 2, pa rin ang mother tongue 345. Pero at this point, mas marami na ang English. And then for grade 3, okay, very limited na lang, 170 na lang ang mother tongue. So talagang karamihan ng na-develop na materials for mother tongue is for grade 1, which is strong. Kaya strong yung mother tongue sa literacy. Pero pagdating na yung using mother tongue as a bridge language for L2, very limited na. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the directive of DepEd is for the school communities to produce their own materials, special priority on beginning reading and children's literature. This material should be original, reflecting local people, events, realities, appropriate to the language, age, and culture of the learners. So this is something that is this is something new. Kasi sanay yung DepEd that everything emanates from the central office or from the publishers from Manila. And there, in DepEd Order 21, there was this directive that each school or each class from kindergarten to grade 3 should read 1 to 2 storybooks per week. So parang ito yung practice sa mga private schools, diba? In private school, there's abundance of storybooks. But now there's the directive that a child should be exposed to at least 50 books during the school year, storybooks. Unfortunately, sa study din sa PIDS in Monhe et al., only 45% of the sample schools have conducted their big book writing. So this is really an area of need. Now, in my own study, ito yun, as I mentioned, I did my study sa Benguet. They're among the high-functioning MTBMLE schools. And if given the right training and support from their principal and PSDS, sila yung sila yung sikreto, bakit strong yung NTBMLE nila, the principal and the supervisor, district supervisor. So from 2010 to 2018, they were able to produce 300 storybook titles, mostly in Kankanaey. And later on, they started producing translating their Kankanaey materials to Filipino and English. Very interesting. Usually, we translate from English or Filipino to the local language. Ito baliktad. So their stories are contextualized about the daily life sa Bugyas, and they are translated to Filipino and English. There are 19 writers that were trained and 6 illustrators. And so ito si Ma'am Madino, she produced 25 titles. Ito rin, si Ma'am Claire. So she shared about her experience sa isang conference lately. So among the books that they produced, there's a set of books that they called IPEDIze. So this includes indigenous knowledge system and practices. You can hear, nakikita mo dito yung mga voices ng mga elders nila, like yung kanilang collective labor, yung paggawa ng how they pound kamote, ginagawa nilang kamote powder para pag tag-ulan, meron silang pagkain, kanilang traditional shampoo, etc. And ito yung isang class sa Luo, sa Bugyas. One result of their materials development, MTBMLE, is developing the love for reading. So dito, sabi ng teacher ni Ma'am Madino, sabi niya, when you do reading of the big book, sabi niya, they will be still and be attentive when you say that you will tell a story. So come immediately and sit down on the floor around you. Wow, they scream with delight. I asked them, what do you think will happen next? They will suggest their guess and later they will say, Kitam? Ayan, you see, I was right. Okay, so talagang nakita ko to, how the children would suddenly change once na nilabas ng teacher yung big book. Talagang there's so much excitement. There were pupils who would copy the storybooks para basahin daw niya sa bahay. Because in that place, walang bookstore. The big books are not, or the storybooks are not available in any store. So it's first time for children to be exposed to storybooks. And these storybooks are about them. Yung mga authors are the teachers they know, the illustrators are their kuya, mga ganyan. So parang it's a very interesting, very delightful sight to see. So this is how they contextualize the big book making, so they conceptualize the story, they write and edit the text. What they do, the teachers, they help each other in editing, and sometimes they ask their students. Because their students, they were exposed to Kankanaey since kindergarten, so they know they are more literate in Kankanaey. So sometimes the students would edit the stories, and then they will include the images. They would find yung mga magaling mag-illustrate sa lugar nila. And right now, 100 pesos ang bayad ng isang image. And then they would field tests, and more editing will happen. And then they will decide isasubmit ko ba to sa division? Some said, I'll just use it for my classroom because what the supportive principal did was to buy huge printers so that teachers in that particular school can print and reproduce their own big or small book. So for grade 2, small book na yun dapat, ano? For smaller, younger, yan yung big book. And then they also have the choice to submit their big book for the competition, or they can submit their big book for uploading, ano, sa LRM portal. So ito yung process nila. This is the process that they develop. Okay, partnership. Now let's go to what kind of partnerships are developed in the MTB-MLE program. When MTB-MLE was introduced in IPED, CHED issued a memorandum about the integration of indigenous people studies or education in the higher ed curricula. No? So ito siya. No? And then DepEd issued a call for project proposal in 2019, tagang millions. They provided billions for schools, HEIs, projects related to language. You know? And then there are some universities that began to, like in UP, we introduced a course in teaching in the mother tongue. So they integrated NTBMLE as part of the Prof Ed curriculum. Some included it as a special topic. There are also universities that formulated MA, PhD in multilingual education, multicultural education, or Visayan studies, Waray studies, or indigenous studies or indigenous education. The latest is from UP Baguio. So ito yung mga example ng MMSU, Mariano Marcos State University, and Lyceum. Ano? Isa to sa mga very interesting. They don't have a Prof Ed course, meron sila tourism. So naka-integrate sa tourism yung indigenous education. I salute itong school na to because what they did was to establish MTB-MLE schools among Dumagats, Batak speaking communities, yung mga IP, yung mga AITA communities sa maraming lugar. So, and then they introduced this program lately. Okay, support from the LGU, mayroong mga LGU policies that support local language, like La Union introduced the local language code or the Iloco code. Zamboanga City also. That's why Zamboanga City is supporting the use of ano na ba yung kanilang Creole language, in Zamboanga, and then Pangasinan is supporting the Pangasinense, sa Bacano, yan, Zamboanga City. Kaya yung kanilang yung materials, everything is provided. The disadvantage here is kunyari La Union and Zamboanga. Ang sinusuportahan lang nila ay yung kanilang lingua franca, like La Union for Ilocano, Zamboanga City for Chabacano. But there are other languages in their area that are not being given the same amount of support. Okay, and then kaya dito sa La Union, because of their Iloco code, they train daycare workers on NTBMLE. Because what's happening, the daycare workers were trained to teach in English. Kaya nakakatawa, the daycare students learn in English, and then pagdating sa kindergarten, mother tongue. So La Union trained the daycare workers. They provided big books, and then they required the St. Louis University in La Union to offer 3 units na classes, courses on NTBMLE. Okay, ayan. And then they provided dictionaries to all schools. And they required yung mga local businesses that their signages would be in Ilocano. Before, ang Jollibee, for example, bawal siyang gumamit ng mother tongue. But now, because of this code, they have to use the Ilocano, yung mga businesses doon. Ito kahapon, lumabas sa balita natin. Itong isa rin, Angeles City is one promoter, one LGU that promotes Kapampangan naman. But it's because of the yung advocacy ng isang linguist diyan, 2017 pa yung kanilang ordinance to use Kapampangan. Okay, appropriate learning assessments. Let me call, DepEd introduce yung LAPG, language assessment, ano ba yung program, okay, performance. So every year they do this. So this is data from 2017. Nakita natin dito na ang pinakamataas ay Surigao Non. Okay. The Surigao Non speakers and Waray speakers, sila yung mga top performers sa kanilang literacy test. Ito yung isang project ng Basa Pilipinas. Isa to sa mga magandang project na nag-implement ng MTB-MLE. They selected division in Region 1 and 7 using Sinugbuanong Binisaya or Sinugbis, yun ang tawag ng mga DepEd, and Ilocano as mother tongue. So they provided complete materials. Each teacher had a set of 20 big books, for example, leveled readers, and training for teachers and school heads. Talagang very strong yung training nila for school head. And the project lasted from 2014 to 2018. Right now, sa Bicol naman sila, they call it ABC. So dito yung result ng study nila. So after 4 years of BASA intervention, grade 2 students are performing significantly better than students prior to the BASA intervention in 5 out of 8 EGRA sub-tests. Okay? So yun, nakita natin yung marked improvement sa Filipino. So ito yung findings nila. There's evidence of transfer from one language to another, especially in book print knowledge and phonological awareness. By the end of grade 3, results show that students are fairly proficient Filipino readers. This suggests that most students are ready to transition to Filipino as the primary language of instruction in most subjects in grade 4. However, they found out that there's weaker transfer in vocabulary and grammar. Ito sa English ito. By the end of grade 3, there's still a significant proportion of students who do not demonstrate that they understand what they read in English. This indicates that more must be done to help prepare students to learn math and science in English in grade 4. So yun ang yun ang isang issue. Kaya it's not surprising na yung mga tinest ng CPLM, mga grade 5 yun, are weak in English. Kasi the study would show na hindi enough yung kanilang grounding sa English. And so that showed in the international test. What are the success factors? Parental literacy, parental involvement in their child's education. So hanggang lahat ito, hindi lang sa Pilipinas, sa buong mundo, if the parents, the community are involved, then there's better performance. In this particular project, trinain nila pati yung mga parents so the children could bring home mga small, yung mga leveled readers, parang storybook na maliliit that the parents can read to their children. And another success factor is the teachers, that they feel supported by their school administration. Administration. So dapat maganda yung relationship ng teacher at yung kanyang principal. So there is a need for regular participation of parents in their children's education. And I hope that as a result of this pandemic, mas nasanay na yung mga parents na tulungan yung mga anak nila, Maybe if there's a blessing brought by this pandemic, is the yung experience of parents of teaching their children how to read. Like sa Bukyas, what they did during the pandemic is to create video para panuorin ng mga magulang para maturuan nila yung mga anak nila sa pagbabasa. Okay, and then another recommendation ng Basa Pilipinas, provide more support to grade 4 learners transitioning to learning math and science content in English. So talagang itong grade 4 is very crucial. Given that learners are still less proficient in English than Filipino, at the end of grade 3, grade 4 teachers will need to ensure that they can scaffold and support children's learning and subject taught in English by grade 4. Okay, so ito yun, explore additional ways of improving English language acquisition in the earlier grades. So maybe we need to revisit yung English curriculum from kindergarten to grade 3. like I found in Bugyas, dahil sabi na, allowed naman na mag mother tongue. So the teachers, even in higher grades, are using mother tongue in their English class. Ano? So talagang there's no parang deliberate effort to introduce L2. Okay, and then grade 1 to 3 learners may benefit from expanded oral language development activities, extended conversation, exposure to supplementary books that touch on science and math content in child-friendly ways, among others. So ito yung mga suggestion ni ng Basa Pilipinas, and they also have yung findings na talaga na yung mga yung boys, yung male learners, talagang talagang may disadvantage, yung underperformance of boys. So they should be given attention in the early grades. So there should, if there's one intervention, ito ay para sa mga male learners. Now let's talk about itong English medium test. So assessment report from CPLM, EGRA, TIMSS, and even PISA revealed that student achievement in English literacy and English taught subjects were not, like science and math, were not promising. So kunyari itong CPLM, 10% of grade 5 Filipino children met the expected reading proficiency level and 16% for math. So ang baba. But if you notice, itong language of testing na ginamit sa CPLM, Cambodia used Khmer, they use Lao language. Malaysia, they use 3, Chinese, Malay, Tamil, Myanmar, their own language, Vietnam use Vietnamese. Tayo lang gumamit ng English, So L2. So imagine, grade 5 sila, they only started learning in English at grade 4 and then they were tested, So that's why I'm suggesting na bakit hindi na lang sa Filipino, or in their L1, in the lingua franca, maybe the selected lingua franca. Ito yung PISA, my friends and I, my colleagues and I were thinking about the PISA results. And kasi, yung mga questions sa PISA are uploaded in the internet, they are not hidden, So if you read at the questions that were asked sa mga 15-year-old, kunyari ito yung isang question on ethical clothing. Ganyan ba yung level? Ganyan na ba yung level ng 15-year-old natin? Are they able to understand this passage and then answer the question, given the instruction that they have, sa English? So can they think about this, yung itong mga complex issues na to, like itong ethical clothing in English, kaya ba nila to, or they can think about these issues but not, they can analyze these issues but in a more familiar language. So ito yung isa rin question, yung chicken health. So sabi dito, refer to the chicken health forum. So the child is asked to analyze itong forum na to. Imagine, chicken health forum. So inisip ko yung mga bata ba, kunyari sa mga island, sa rural area, familiar ba sila sa pag-analyze ng chicken health forum? Okay. So, ayan, So, dinadala ba nila yung, kasi dito, there's an issue na sarado kasi yung vet, gusto niyang dalhin yung kanyang manok sa vet, kailang sarado. Anong gagawin niya? So, yung bata ba, sanay ba sa idea na dadalhin mo yung manok mo sa vet? So parang I was thinking na maybe hindi siya appropriate to measure critical thinking. Okay? So maybe if the children, if their critical thinking, their literacy is measured through using familiar context. Okay? Familiar language. Maybe their ability to think will be reflected more accurately. So parang feeling ko, parang na-disadvantage yung mga bata natin. And now there's this idea that, there's something wrong with our teachers, with our students, because they rank at the bottom. But, are they given appropriate tests? Okay, so according to this study, she wrote an article on assessing multilingual competencies. Sinasabi niya na iba talaga ang capacities, ang competencies ng mga bata who are multilingual. Sabi niya, all assessment policies like PISA and TIMSS and practices are based on monolingual constructs. Remember that OECD countries are predominantly monolingual. Sila yung mga nagtitest ng PISA, whereby test takers are expected to demonstrate their language proficiency in one language at a time. Further, multilingual users who rarely reach language proficiency in each of the languages that is identical to that of their monolingual counterparts are always being compared to them and thus receive lower scores. Consequently, they are penalized for their multilingual competencies, sending a message that multilingual knowledge is a liability. Ano? So talagang we have to examine, ano ba yung sinasabi nitong PISA result na to, itong TIMSS result na to. Ano? And even in the US, pinipili nila yung kukuha ng TIMSS and PISA. Ano? Kung yung bata ay immigrant, ano, bago siyang salta sa America, they are not allowed to take the PISA in some states. And even in China, talagang translate nila yung PISA question into Mandarin and in ways that are familiar to Chinese test takers. And they chose test takers sa mga big cities lang sa China. In other words, since there are other languages in China, no? Hindi lang naman Mandarin, children from the periphery, the provinces, were not allowed to take the PISA. No? And in other countries like Spain, they translated the test into the languages in Spain, Spanish, Catalan, Basque, etc. Pero sa atin, para siguro makatipid, English lang ang ginamit. I don't know kung if they contextualize it in the Philippine English, mukhang hindi. Kaya talagang there's a this is a cost of concern. So ito yung challenges. DepEd Bureau of Curriculum Development conducted consultation all over the Philippines about MTB-MLE. Mahabang proseso ito. Ito yung mga nasakap nilang challenges ng programa. No? So merong misconception sa mga parents and stakeholders. They feel uncomfortable na gamitin yung mother tongue nila. They prefer Filipino and English. Okay, kahit na may policy na on mother tongue, the linguistic landscape in schools remain to be dominated by either English or Filipino. Learning resources is still lacking. Kahit Cebu, na major language yung Cebuano Binisaya. And then wala pa siyang language transition program. Wala pang na-develop. It's not yet conceptualized, operationalized. Okay, the Filipino Sign Language of students with special needs as L1 has not yet been fully explored. Wala pang position, So may position para sa PE, MAPE, English, Filipino, iba-ibang subjects, science, supervisor, pero wala pang position for the mother tongue coordinator. So what I see in the field, yung in charge sa kindergarten, minsan yung in charge sa Filipino, in charge sa English, so yung nagiging mother tongue coordinator. So dapat gastusan ito if the government wants to take it seriously. So language mapping is either not properly done or not done at all. So when we were doing the operations manual, I found out that some supervisors, ay meron palang language mapping DepEd order. So hindi siya na-implement talaga. So kailangan itong gawin. Teachers, both pre-service and in-service, receive little training or training on NTBMLE. Okay, so schools that have different languages are left on their own to determine which localization efforts to pursue. So walang guidance. Dialects are often disadvantaged in development of orthography and learning materials. So yun ang isang nakita namin. For example, Ilocano, yung Ilocano ng Ilocos Norte na malalim, yun ang ginagamit. Kaya yung mga nasa Tarlac, nagrereklamo sila. And the same with Sinugbuanong Bisaya, yung Sinugbuanong Bisaya sa Cebu, yun ang ini-impose, kaya yung nasa Mindanao na Bisaya speaking, nahihirapan sila kasi parang malalim. So, dapat may contextualization din. DepEd lack teachers who are proficient in languages that they teach. School division offices receive varying extent of support from stakeholder. There are stakeholders that are supportive, karamihan hindi. And then DepEd policies of MTBMLE could be limiting, imposing, or vague. Yan ang report ng BCD. Now, what are some possibilities? I hope that this operations manual na ginagawa namin will be useful. So I hope that you would support its implementation. Kaya mahaba siya, mga 200 pages. But I hope it contains some specifics how in implementing MTBMLE. EDCOM 2 is going to has yung EDCOM 2 ito a resolution to examine, review Philippine education. It's being forwarded by Senator Angara, and the MTBMLE is one of the program na kanilang i-analyze. And then there are MTBMLE related House Bill nabanggit ni Sir Bernardo kanina, yung kay Mark Go. And then there's also yung amendment ni introduced by Joel Salceda, amendment of the K-12 policy. Here, it stated that hindi yung lingua franca or native language, but it's the learner's language ang dapat gamitin as medium of instruction. And then there's a policy for the bill by Alfred Vargas to have a national evaluation policy, para pati yung mga programs like MTB will be evaluated by independent body. Parang there's a suggestion here that dapat hindi DepEd ang magre-report kung ano yung performance nila. There should be an outside independent body that will examine, that will review education and will report to the public. Okay, so from my own perspective, I found that ito yung mga talaga major need. Policies, marami na tayong policies sa MTB, kailangan na lang implement. So ito, implementation, funding, ano yung incentive sa teacher? Kung titignan mo yung DepEd, mga memos, daan-daan, literally daan-daan na policies, ang child protection, ganyan, WASH, na kailangan implement ng teacher. Ano yung incentive niya para implement ito? Ano yung mga disincentive? Okay, paano siya maisama sa mga monitoring tools na ginagamit? Kailangan ng community support at ito, continuing training and mentoring and appropriate learning assessment. May mga assessment na ginagawa sa MTBMLE sa ibang countries like Africa and Cambodia. Maybe we can learn from them so that we can display, we can demonstrate kung ano yung alam ng mga bata. Ito yung medyo, kailangan din ito, like resources. Pero if you notice, marami nang nagawa, kailangan lang makompleto. Okay? So if I may proposal to you, like for you who are doing research and consulting, sa UST, meron kayo mga lab school, may UST sa Bicol, you're working with local languages, maybe you can do research to provide guidance and models sa MTBMLE sa Pilipinas. Kasi yung mga models ngayon ay sa Canada, US. And we have to consider that sa Philippines, low resource, maraming crowded yung mga classroom, minimal ang support ng parents, multilingual, multicultural. So maybe you can do a study and provide training on teaching literacy in a linguistically diverse school. You can look into the example of Lailima. Ito sa Senegal to, meron silang website. How do you teach reading kung maraming mother tongue sa paligid? How do you teach English or additional languages in linguistically diverse context? Excuse me. So ito yung you can study yung available models like yung dual language immersion, yung TransLanguaging ni Garcia, yung sheltered instruction, saka yung content language integration learning. Ito yung mga areas if you're going to teach or train teachers, para may strengthen nila yung L1 to L2. And then how do you use L1 as LOI in all grade level, the FSL, monitoring, how to strengthen yung mga community and family literacy program, how to create multilingual storybooks. Kasi ngayon puro one language, ano, parang isang language lang ginagamit nila. And how do you establish, maybe maganda tong social enterprise? Kasi yung mga teachers, marami pa silang stories, like yung mga friends ko na teachers sa Bugyas, ang dami-dami na lang stories, kailangan limited yung funding nila. So I wish there's a publisher, local publisher, who will capture their story, will publish their story. Para pagpupunta ka, hindi lang puro sa Bugyas, hindi lang puro vegetable ang mabibili mo, mayroon ding available na big books. In fact, one store, na nakita nila yung mga storybooks, ay gusto namin ibenta yan. Ano? Then we need a study on appropriate assessment tools for science, math, literacy, and higher grades using Filipino and other local lingua franca. No? So dapat wag natin hayaan na English lang ang language of learning. Ano? Dapat siguro panahon na we intellectualize our local languages, starting with Filipino and other lingua franca. You know, we cannot sustain the idea that our local languages are only used for social studies, values education. How about for more complex subjects like science, math? So kailangan talaga ng intellectualization of our languages. We need to develop MTB-MLE scorecard so that DepEd, the local DepEd, division DepEd can report, to the stakeholders what they do. Like what they do sa Naga, Iloilo. There are some LGUs that require their DepEd, local DepEd to report to the community what's happening. And then, we need also to think about our heritage languages. Paano na yung mga languages na hindi na siya buhay, namamatay na siya? Kasi when you say mother tongue, ano yung ginagamit ng bata? But how about languages that are, dying? How about our local scripts? So there are, the baybayin, Kapampangan the Kapampangan group are binubuhay nila, yung kanilang script, and even among the Mangyan. So maybe we can study that possibility. Okay, so let me close with this comment by Monhe et al. Sa PID study. Sabi nila, notwithstanding the numerous problems it is facing, the MTBMLE has very solid pedagogical foundation and embodies the concept of learner-centered education. Thus, this study does not question the wisdom of implementing the program, but rather seeks to highlight the challenges it is facing with a view of seeking more effective, efficient, and acceptable ways of implementing the program. Overall, the program needs better appreciation of the conceptual problems it is facing and the cooperation of all stakeholders to be implemented well. So I hope that you, as one of the stakeholders of education, will participate in implementing, in strengthening the MTBMLE in our countries. So dito na po ako magtatapos. Maraming salamat. Diyos ti Agina, Namwaw. This is a thank you in Kankanay, in Diyos Mabalos. Salamat po.
That was indeed an insightful discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Arzado. I'm sure our participants here in Zoom learned and gained so much from our resource speaker's lecture. As I mentioned a while ago, an academic exchange will come right after the lecture. So for our attendees, you may now post your questions in our chat box. You may also want to include and of course mention your affiliation. With this, we shall proceed to our question and answer session. May we give the virtual floor to Mr. Leroy Christian Q. Rubio, also from the PhD ELS program and a faculty from Southern Luzon State University.
Thank you, Sir Joram, and thank you to Dr. Ched for the very comprehensive lecture on the current trends and issues in MTB-MLE in the Philippines. Definitely, this is an eye-opener to everyone, most especially to us PhD ELS students and other attendees who wishes to venture in researching about MTB-MLE and its implementation. So for those who have questions or clarifications, kindly raise your hand so that I can acknowledge you, or you may use the chat box for your questions, as mentioned earlier by Sir Joram. Do we have questions from the audience? all I can see is congratulations to Dr. Ched. Really, it is an eye-opener to everyone. And we were actually, personally, I was very surprised that the Department of Education has a lot of policies with regards to MTB-MLE. And obviously, some are not being implemented. And so I think our goal now is how are we going to take part in the implementation of these policies by the Department of Education.
Roy, there's a comment from Miss Nikki Shine Namia. You might want to read that comment, and then we can also ask Dr. Chen to give her comment. About this comment.
I didn't see the comment from Miss Nikki. I think it's a private message.
I know it's sent to everyone. If I may read it on her behalf. The modules used for MTB-MLE are unfortunately not in the dialect of the actual place. For example, here in North Cotabato, for municipalities that are Ilonggo, the modules are using are Hiligaynon, but that is not the dialect in the areas. Our Ilonggo here is far different from Hiligaynon. That is why teachers and students have a difficulty in grasping the lessons because they are not using the L1 that is really existing in their areas. Diyan pa lang may problema na. Maybe we could ask Dr. Chen to comment on it.
Oo. Yun nga, kulang kasi sa orientation. For example, in that Benguet area where I did my study, Ilocano was prescribed as the materials. Actually, kahon-kahon na mga Ilocano materials were sent there, pero hindi nakabukas. Kasi they thought na hindi matututo yung mga anak namin, mga students namin, if we use Ilocano. So they developed their own. So talagang depende sa initiative, sa agency ng principal, ng teachers. Sometimes, it's understandable kasi ang DepEd is very hierarchical. Kung ano yung sinabi, yun lang. That's why we need to train, capacitate the teacher, principal, the supervisor so that they can decide what's best. Dapat ang titignan nila, ano ba yung outcome, expected outcome ng NTBMLE, makabasa, matuto sa mga content area, matuto ng L2. Paano mo mahihit yung target na yon kung ang gagamitin mo naman ay parang L2 rin, parang foreign language na yan. So dapat matignan nila yung essence, ano ba yung essence ng policy na yun, para saan ba yun, So feeling ko ganun dapat ang, teachers should be trained to think critically sa college, university pa lang. Are we training our teachers to think independently, to think, ano ba talaga yung issue, or are they just being trained to obey kung, without thinking of its implications? So I hope ganun mag-isip yung mga teacher dyan.
Okay, thank you po. Here's another question from Isabella Herson Valdez. Hello po, good afternoon. I'm taking up Bachelor of Arts in English Language Studies at Isabela State University, Kawayan Campus. My question is, knowing that the Philippines is a multilingual country, is it right to choose local languages based on their popularity and disregard the minoritized languages in the Philippines for the MTBMLE program?
So yun ang nandun sa bill ni Salceda, kung ano yung language ng mga bata, yun ang gamitin. So feeling ko kung maituro talaga yung approach ng TransLanguaging, that parang sa yung mga teacher educator dito, yung mga teacher, di ba? We are taught how to do differentiated instruction. So you will teach your students based sa kanilang learning style, o kinesthetic learner, or auditory learner, visual learner. So meron kang ganun, So ganun din sa language, differentiation and even universal design for learning can also be used in MTBMLE, So medyo challenging lang kasi sanay ka lang sa kung ano yung nandyan. So kailangan talaga matrain ng teacher. So very clear naman na the child's mother tongue ang nakalagay sa policy. Kaya minsan may mga sinasabi yung RA 10533 na child's mother tongue ba or your native language, ganyan So you remember, you are a teacher, so your role is learning. So how do you affect learning? Dapat yun ang laging tinatanong. Ano? So, yung iba kasi minsan, dahil yung mga ibang advocates ng NTBMLE, they are after the preservation of the language. Yung minsan nagkaroon ng conflict. And so basically, sino tong isang linguist na to, na Jewish linguist, sinasabi niya that if a language has to be revitalized, dapat sa sa environment, sa lipunan makikita, like yung ginagawa sa La Union, yung mga signages, yung mga yan, nakikita paglabas mo ng campus, yung like kunyari sa Benguet, yung kankana ay ginagamit yan sa radyo, yung mga sine, may mga short films sila. Pati sa YouTube, may gumagawa ng lampitok, yung YouTube na na cartoons na kankana ay, So if there's songs, marami sila, kasi mahilig sila sa mga di ba, mga country songs sa Benguet. Kung pupunta ka sa isang lugar sa may Dangwa, marami silang CD ng mga country song in Kankanay. So if the languages are used in various areas, sa churches, sa mga media, sa arts, ganyan, then hindi problema yung language vitality. Huwag yung i-pressure yung teacher na sila yung magtumutok sa language vitality. Dapat ang trabaho ng teacher is learning. Okay, of course, they also have to teach, pride over your language and identity. Kasama rin yun, social studies yun. Pero dapat clear na, dapat yung role ng teacher. Saka dapat may role din nga yung lipunan. So yun pa aking masasabi.
Thank you po. Another one we have from Ma'am Ethel Joy Maninang. So what can you say about the suspension of the MTB-MLE as discussed before the discussion proffer? She is from Tarlac City Division.
Bill pa lang naman po yun, ma'am. Hindi pa siya batas. So it's still a bill being discussed at Congress. Una, ang nag-introduce ng bill na yun ay si Romulo. And then, nandun ako sa hearing, hindi siya nag-prosper yan. Sumugod yung mga taga-LSP at mga ibang advocates doon sa Congress. So, hindi siya nag-prosper. And then later on, ito naman si Marco. Ang masaklap kay Marco, yun, sa Baguio kasi siya. Siyempre sa Baguio, maraming languages. And DepEd chose Ilocano. So, parang coming from a linguistically diverse area, kailangan talaga mayroong, mas pag-isipan kung ano ang best implementation sa mga lugar na yun. At kahit actually sa Manila, hindi mo isipin na, Tagalog na lang or Filipino, kasi Manila naman to. What if they have students who want to maintain yung kanilang, or they use Bisaya at home, Dapat mayroon din, kunyari sa UST, you have your lab school. Tingnan nyo rin kung ano yung, hindi na lang sasabihin na, Filipino, nasa Manila naman kami. Marami pa palang tanong. Sige, sir.
Okay po. Another from Sir Christian Paul Sunga. So how can we promote MTB-MLE in this era of TikTok and social media where students learn and more interested to foreigners? Just a thought. He's from Tarlac State University EDD program.
Kasi what we want naman ay children to be multilingual, di ba? Kung interesado sila sa, like mga anak ko, magaling sila mag-Koreano, di masaya ako. So we're not saying that you just limit to L1, so if they can, learn other languages from the internet, that will be very nice.
Okay po. So we have a question from Sir King Arman Kalingasan from Notre Dame University of Cotabato City. So in Cotabato City, we have pupils come from various ethno-linguistic groups like Magindanaon, Tagalog, Cebuano, Iranon, Marano, and Hiligaynon. It's really a challenge for the learners to use their home language in learning inside the classroom, because the language of instruction being used is the lingua franca, which is Tagalog. How should the DepEd address the concerns of learners in a multilingual setting?
So ito po yung nilalaman ng operations manual. I hope that as a result of this manual, may inform, if you are in Notre Dame University, maybe you can conduct training on TransLanguaging. Kasi how can you use these languages, Di ba alam natin, mga language students kayo, di ba? Yung TransLanguaging, yung mayroong receptive and then mayroong productive. So maybe they can Here, receptive language is Tagalog, but productive, they can write what they know. They can express the reaction to a certain story in their own language using the Filipino orthography. Kagaya ng ginagawa dun sa Chiang Mai, the teacher who speaks Thai teaches in Thai, but they are given the space to translate or to express their reflection in Hmong, Karen, and other languages in that area. So kailangan talaga, I hope that the Notre Dame faculty would, study how to, maybe they can start with their own lab school on how to, use this Iranon, Cebuano, Maranao as resources. So yun po.
Okay, so
Leroy.
thank you, Dr. Ched. So we are actually receiving a lot of questions from our audience here, but unfortunately we cannot accommodate every question because we are running out of time due to time restrictions. Maybe we can reserve this one. So I'm returning the floor again to Sir Joram, our moderator. Thank you, Dr. Ched, for answering the questions.
Thank you. Siguro, pwede bang mag-promote, if you want, we have an MTB-MLE Advocates FB group. So, kung may mga tanong kayo, nandun yung mga pantas, yung mga eksperto. So, you can join that FB group and we would be happy to interact with you sa mga questions nyo. So, MTB-MLE Advocates, yun ang pangalan ng FB group.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arsadon. We will definitely join that specific Facebook group. And of course, thank you to Sir Leroy for facilitating our question and answer session. Again, Dr. Arsadon, of course, would like to express again our deepest gratitude for sharing us, of course, a lot of valuable insights and of course, for answering our participants' questions about our topic this morning. On that note, we would like to award the certificate of appreciation to our resource speaker, Dr. Maria Mercedes Arsado. So right now, I will now give the floor to Ms. Criza May Sibalisong from PhD ELS program and a faculty from the University of Baguio to award and read the content of the certificate.
Thank you, Sir Joram. Iaman Kasin, Dr. Arzadon, and thank you also to our participants. So let me read the citations of our certificate. University of Santo Tomas Graduate School presents this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Maria Mercedes Arzadon for sharing her time and expertise as our resource speaker in a webinar titled Current Issues and Concerns in MTB-MLE, held on July 21, 2021 from 10 a.m. to 12 noon via Zoom. Signed, Professor Rachel B. Lintao, PhD, Program Lead of English Language Studies, and Professor Michael Anthony C. Vasco, PhD, the Dean of the UST Graduate School. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for our participants, your certificates will be sent via your registered email after you answer our evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Criza. Now we have already reached the end of this webinar, and we do hope that you have learned so much this morning. And of course, that you will bring and share the knowledge that you have gained today in respective institutions. To further show our appreciation, we would like to invite everyone to join us on screen for the photo opportunity. Since we have more than 150 participants, specifically I'm saying 158 participants, we'll be taking a number of pictures depending on the number of panels, of course, that we have. Again, may invite all the participants, of course, to turn on the cameras for our picture taking. All right, so for our first panel, 1, 2, 3, smile. Now for our second panel, okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, so we have seven panels, by the way. All right, so for our third panel, 1, 2, 3, smile. Now, fourth panel, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, fifth panel. All right, so again, I'm seeing a lot of participants who haven't turned on their cameras. Hopefully, you'll be able to join us for this photo opportunity. Okay, fifth panel, 1, 2, 3, smile. Sixth panel. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. And of course, for our last panel, okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, there we go. Okay, thank you so much, of course, for turning on your cameras. All right, so I'm sure, of course, that everyone is full of learning today, but already hungry for lunch. So to formally close our webinar, may we yield the virtual floor to our program lead in the USD Graduate School ELS program and the chair of the Department of English. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Rachel Bilintao for her closing remarks.
Dr. Alejandro Bernardo, AD, my boss at the Faculty of Arts and Letters, and course facilitator of language planning, our esteemed resource speaker, Dr. Maria Mercedes Estigoy Arzadon, our PhD students, the organizers of this event, colleagues from the Department of English, dear students, guests, a pleasant day. It's a fascinating and enriching experience having learned some of the crucial issues and concerns that beset our educational system, particularly the implementation of the MTB-MLE. Kudos to our PhD students for organizing another successful webinar. The same appreciation goes to your prof, Dr. B. Thank you, Dr. Arzadon, for sharing your time and expertise in today's event. I admire your passion in creating people's awareness on MTB-MLE through your blog site with all the resources that you're sharing there. I also got to read your very interesting and well-written dissertation on policy enactment in MTB-MLE in Big Book Making among teachers in Benguet. Congratulations. Recognizing and quoting this headline from Language Magazine, mother tongue is key to world education growth. Indeed, implementing MTB-MLE the right way may be a daunting task, but it can be done. And we all have our part to do. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, Dr. Lintao, for your message and for allowing us to collaborate with the Department of English, for sharing us your time and resources, and for making this event possible. As we now end our webinar, kindly check the link posted in the chat box and scan the QR code for your certificate of participation. Please also do not forget to answer the evaluation immediately, as the link will only be available until 1 p.m. Again, this has been Joram Kim Corcuera, reminding everyone to keep safe always. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar titled Current Issues and Concerns in MTB-MLE. Till we meet again in more symposia to come, God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.